and welcome to A Brief Introduction to Culture, a pre-work video for the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio. We are excited to be doing programming with you. To prepare for our upcoming conversations, we want to get you thinking about culture, cultural identity, and how we are part of and reinforce culture in the roles that we serve. Let us begin by discussing our first key concept, which is culture. Culture is the totality of many norms and values expressed by individuals and institutions. These norms and values govern and reinforce the way that we communicate, how gender roles manifest in our society, expectations of family structure, our relationship to time and place, and so much more. Norms can be described as what is considered correct and normal, while anything that deviates from this is considered abnormal. An example of this might be that it is considered a norm in the United States still to have a nuclear family that consists of two parents, usually a mother and father, and a number of children. When families have one parent, or when those parents do not align with what is expected of a mother and father role, it can be looked at with scrutiny, scorn, or a deficit perspective. Values describe beliefs common to a group of people. These beliefs guide the behavior and decisions of people within that group and can be considered symbolic of that group. An example of this in the United States is valuing individualism, the notion that the one is more important than the many. When individualistic cultures conflict with collectivistic cultures, for example, many Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous communities, there can be friction around priorities. In individualistic cultures, priorities center on the self, whereas in collectivist cultures, the goals, aspirations, and well-being of the groups that people are in are prioritized. I'll share a brief example of this. In my history working in higher education, I would work with many families from all different cultural backgrounds and experiences. One student of mine, I'll call him Ruben, who was Latino, had just started college. I worked with him closely as his advisor and coach to get him in the door, enrolled, and started on courses. About halfway through the semester, he came to me and said he was struggling because he needed to work to support his family, as they were having a hard time with bills. He also had a grandfather who was sick and needed rides to the hospital. Ruben was the other person in the household with a car besides his parents, and since his parents also needed to work, he needed to take his grandfather to the hospital in addition to working. He said that all of these responsibilities and college, he was not sure if he would be able to stay enrolled. He also mentioned that he tried to talk to other staff and that they felt he should put his schooling first. Ruben told me he would drop out of college to support his family if that's what he needed to do. Thankfully, I was able to work with him to get him some of his coursework online so he could stay in college. However, what this story illustrates is that distinction and friction between an individualistic culture, like mostly the United States, telling Ruben he needed to put himself first, and the collectivist culture where Ruben was from, which told him he needed to put the needs of his family before himself. One way to conceptualize cultural norms and values is through the cultural iceberg. The iceberg allows us to visualize how elements of culture are easy to see, like the ones on top, or hard to see, like the ones on the bottom. For example, it is easier to see a culture's food, ways of dressing, celebration of holidays, and festivals or art. These are elements that can be found by merely looking around in a space or through superficial interaction with others. The harder to see elements such as gender roles, beliefs and assumptions, manners, or humor are something that comes from an ongoing engagement with that culture. One example from above is manners, which vary widely by culture. For example, in the United States, it is considered very rude to burp during or after a meal. When it does happen, one usually utters a quick "excuse me" and apologizes. However, in countries such as Turkey and Saudi Arabia, it is encouraged and actually considered rude if you do not burp. Another example that may be familiar is the belief about eye contact in the United States. Here it is considered important to make eye contact, and when a person doesn't, it is considered rude, or it may be assumed that they are lying or not trustworthy. However, in many Eastern countries such as Korea and China, it is considered rude or aggressive, especially if someone is making eye contact with a person in a higher position on the hierarchical order, like a supervisor. Every organization has its own subculture and reinforces the larger culture in which it exists. Therefore, by understanding our larger cultural influences in the United States, where we personally reside, and the organizations that we are part of, we can understand what values and norms we are reinforcing through their rules, disciplinary practices, hierarchical interactions such as student-teacher or supervisor-employee, etc. For example, providing rewards and recognitions to the group is more likely to motivate people from collectivist cultures, whereas individualistic cultures are more likely motivated by individual rewards. Taking a balanced approach to providing more rewards and recognitions is vital to making a more inclusive team environment. Thinking about organizational culture, there are many ways that this manifests just like our cultural iceberg. For example, it is easy to see whether a business or organization or school has a formal or informal dress code, such as business professional, business casual, uniforms, or casual. These things can change from place to place as well. You may have an organization where it is business professional or business casual throughout the week and then dress down days on Fridays. But these are things that are easy to see within an organization. Other things that are easy to see are traditions, such as celebrating birthdays in a staff meeting each month or having spirit weeks for schools. Harder things to see would be expectations for body language. Is it appropriate to stand and cross your arms when you're having a conversation with a supervisor, for example? Is it appropriate for you to be friends with people outside of work, particularly if you are being friends with a supervisor? If the personal comes into work and what socialization centers on, if it's appropriate to talk about your home life within the workplace, or if you're only supposed to talk about workplace interactions. Additionally, patterns of leadership, such as preferred types of leadership. Does an organization have authoritative leadership, inspirational leadership? How is feedback given from leadership to the people that they supervise? All of these things are harder to see and come from interacting within a structure. Take a moment now to think about what comes to your mind when you think of organizational culture. What characteristics can you identify in your school, business, or organization? In your handout on page 2, you will find a blank version of the cultural iceberg activity. Please pause the video now and take the next 5 minutes to identify as much about your place of work as possible. Welcome back. I hope you were able to identify some elements that stand out to you about your place of work in relation to the cultural iceberg. Now we want to get a sense of how we form our cultural identities. This is important to the conversation because these cultural identities can shape how we interact with others, the norms, values, ideologies, etc., that we reinforce or that influence the way we interpret information that is shared with us. Cultural identity can be described as an individual's affiliation or identification with a group, shared history, and experience. We will continue to explore this concept in our next activity. To explore the way that cultural identity impacts us, we will begin by reflecting on our cultural identities and influences. Here you see my cultural identity chart example. A blank chart is available in your handout, and we will provide you an example on the next slide. The cultural identity chart is one way for us to begin to conceptualize our cultural identities and how they manifest. You'll see a number of different prompts here and 2 blank spaces. These blank spaces are so that you can include other influences that are not listed. These other influences could be from subcultures that you are a part of, communities that you engage with, or even geographic locations such as another country or part of the United States that you are connected to in this way. I'll take a moment to explain a few of my examples and also how you can frame the categories for your exploration. Religion, spirituality, and non-religious influence demonstrates how religion may or may not influence your cultural lens. In my example, there was no formal religion in my household. My parents wanted me to grow up and learn about the world before making that decision about what I thought. As a result, it was always encouraged that I read about many religious beliefs. Today I am a pagan and pantheist, and believe in many entities and deities. I don't label my religion in any particular way, but I know that it manifests in me feeling connected to the earth and energies of the universe. This is intertwined with my connections to the alternative subculture, which I will explain next. Alternative subcultures can look like a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and they have changed over time. Some examples might be punk from the 70s through today, or the emo craze from the mid-2000s to 2013. For myself, it is connected to both a code of ethics and artistic expression. I believe that being congruent, my words, thoughts, and actions aligning with my values, is important. Being true to yourself and who you are is a key element for many alternative people. Additionally, music is often viewed as a cornerstone in the community. Much of the alternative scene, such as punk, goth, metal, etc., are based around musical genres and experiences like clubs and concerts. Lastly, body modifications such as piercings and tattoos can be considered a part of the umbrella of alternative subcultures. As someone who is very much a member of this community, the ability to decorate my body and express myself through those decorations is something that means a great deal to me. I am also a member of the Church of Body Modification, which is a non denominational church focused on body modification as religious expression or spiritual practice. Other categories you'll see listed on the chart are cultural heritages, which include the racial, ethnic, and cultural elements of your upbringing. Note that culture, race, and ethnicity are distinct categories and may influence a person differently. In my case, I am biracial, black and white, but my mother being from Germany means I likely have different cultural influences than someone who may be a fifth generation American with German heritage. Family, thinking about your family dynamic and how that culturally manifested. If you grew up, for example, in a multi generational home where you, your parents, and perhaps grandparents lived in the same household, that would provide a different experience than someone like myself who lived with only 3 people in my home. The same could be said if someone has younger or older parents. Those cultural influences will also impact the way someone develops. For instance, as a millennial, both of my parents were much older than my peers. The generational influences they had, in conjunction with other experiences and identities that they held, had a profound influence on me as a child and young person. Speaking of generational influences and events, these are key moments in time that would have changed the world around you. For my mother in Germany, post-World War II was difficult for her, and she would tell me stories about receiving fruit for the holidays because they could not access it otherwise. My father was born right in the beginning of the Great Depression, which shaped the way he viewed money and spending. In my case, 9/11 changed the world around me forever. The war in the Middle East is something that has been happening for most of my life, and I lived through several recessions, which has shaped the job and housing market in my adult life. These are all events and experiences that have impacted culture and how I see the world. Language communities refer to the different languages that a person may speak and how that impacts their cultural understanding. I've studied many languages over the course of my life, but included only the ones that I have somewhat of a working competency in here. I am a native English speaker who learned conversational German through my mother. I studied Mandarin and Spanish in high school, which introduced me through academic study to other cultures and experiences. For some people, they may not have had the opportunity to study other cultures and gain that different perspective. It also shapes who I'm able to interact with and how I can engage with them. Lastly, thinking about our nationalities, these identities refer to where we hold citizenship. While I am a U.S. citizen and have only lived here, I do have family, my grandparents who are no longer with us, and my uncle in Germany, who I have stayed in touch with throughout my life. Therefore, there is a cultural attachment through that familial connection in Germany, as well as within the U.S., where my father's family resides. It is important when considering our nationality and what that means for and to us. Now that we've spent some time talking about yours truly, it is time for you to think about yourself. In your handout on page 3, you have a blank copy of the cultural identity chart. Please feel free to fill in as much detail as helpful for you to reflect on your culture. There are 2 spaces for you to fill in your subcultures or other groups that you are a part of. While this is not required, it is encouraged. Once you've completed the chart, please click play on the video to move on to the reflection questions. You may now pause the video and begin working on your chart. Welcome back! Hopefully you were able to flesh out your chart to get a sense of your cultural identity and a few ways we are influenced by cultural identities that we hold. Now that we have both our organization's cultural iceberg and the cultural identity chart, let's take a moment to consider the following questions. We will be examining these concepts in your upcoming program. Looking at your cultural identity chart and the cultural iceberg, consider the following. What are the similarities between your cultural identities and the culture of your organization? Where are there differences? How do cultural values and norms influence the work that you do and the way that you do your work? Your interaction with colleagues? Your interactions with clients or students? How does recognizing our cultural identities and characteristics benefit us? Please pause the video and take time to reflect on these questions in your handout. Thank you so much for taking the time to complete this, a brief introduction to culture video. To recap, culture is comprised of easy and hard to see characteristics. Much like we observed in the iceberg, organizations, schools, and other groups have subcultures and may reinforce the culture in which they exist. Values and norms are key components of culture. We use these values and norms to govern and reinforce the way that we communicate, how gender roles manifest in our society, expectations of family structure, our relationship to time and place, and so much more. We all have cultural identities that shape the way that we respond to and enact cultural norms and values. And understanding our cultural lens is crucial to learning about the cultures of others. We cannot begin to understand others if we do not have a frame of reference for ourselves. The information you've reflected upon today will be useful in your future programming with us here at the Diversity Center. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.